while on board the troop transport, the USS Siboney. He was up, and his hot hand was draining one particular soldier. With little left to stake, the desperate soldier put up the deed to his family-run hotel and saloon in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. Claude was skeptical. He'd never heard of Okmulgee, and questioned whether the deed was even legitimate. He was assured, and the soldier appealed to Claude's more primordial senses by telling him the place was crawling with pretty native women, hungering for war heroes. That was enough to convince him, and with one roll of the dice, he became the proud owner of the Depot Hotel. It's more likely that Claude heard about the oil boom going on in Oklahoma that was attracting people from all over the country, and saw an opportunity to make a good living. Okmulgee was one of those cities experiencing an influx of people. In 1919, it was the fourth largest city in the state. But Claude wasn't interested in drilling for oil. He wanted to serve those capitalizing on the boom and purchased the hotel, located on East 5th Street, across from the Frisco train depot. After his honorable discharge in August 1919, he spent a short time reconnecting back home in Watertown, and then made the long, circuitous 1,400-mile rail trip to Oklahoma. The American West was still wild in 1919, and was fully romanticized by Wild West shows and silent cowboy movies, starring Harry Carey, William S. Hart, and Douglas Fairbanks in the burgeoning film industry. When Claude stepped off the train in Okmulgee, he stepped into an environment unlike anything he'd seen at home or overseas. The flat brown prairies stretched endlessly over the horizon and stood in stark contrast to the hills and mountains of northern New York State, or anything he'd seen in Europe. Okmulgee was in the midst of an oil boom that would help fuel the growing American auto industry, and the old dirt roads that surrounded the city square now accommodated a booming commerce and sidled dozens of new modern buildings that lined entire blocks. The Southwest was set to become the oil capital of the world and would make millionaires and billionaires out of the descendants of prairie farmers. By the time Claude had arrived, Okmulgee had blossomed to over 4,000 residents and featured a substantial Cherokee population, owing to former President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act of 1830. Following Jackson's order, thousands of Cherokees were forcibly relocated from their homes in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina by the U.S. Army and moved to settlements in Oklahoma. The 2,200-mile trek was made by foot, and along the way, 4,000 people died from disease and exposure. This became known as the Trail of Tears. Among the descendants of the survivors were Edmund Franklin Graves, his wife Zora Gertrude Hardgrave, and their 13 children. Zora was the housekeeper at the Depot Hotel, and several times a week she made the 15-mile journey from Henrietta with one or more of her daughters in tow to assist her. Usually it was her eldest daughter, Denny Gertrude Gaines, who went by the anglicized version of her name, Edna. Although he was twice her age, Claude was smitten and took every opportunity he could to playfully grope and paw the 16-year-old maiden when nobody was looking. It often ended with him getting walloped across the jaw by her. But below the surface, the romantic feeling was mutual. This cat-and-mouse game ensued for several months, and Claude eventually made his feelings known. It also started to be noticed by the saloon patrons, and one regular, who warned Claude of the potential consequences of his actions, was the rector of St. Anthony's Church, Father Urbain de Hask. In addition to the sinful nature of his actions, Father Urbain advised Claude of Edna's notorious brothers, known around town as the Gaines Boys. Hoyt, Earl, and Orby were well-known desperados who'd already spent considerable time in jail. If word got back to them about Claude's brazenness toward Edna, they'd waste no time coming for him. But even that wasn't enough to stop Claude. He was head over heels in love with Edna. Being the peacemaker, and not wanting to see Claude shot,